So I was not drinking strawberry beer before I came, just in case. Yeah. And so today I wanted to, last year I was supposed to give you a presentation, and I was going to be on the Holy Land trip that I had just gotten off of with a few parishioners. And so I still wanted to do that because I think it's important to, one, show you what happened. It's a beautiful thing. But also I want to try to leave some time, and I don't know, how much time do I have? 3 hours? Was it? Just 2. Okay, yeah. I wanted to try to leave some time, though, for you to be able to ask some questions. You might have some questions, not just about the Holy Land, but maybe just what's going on in the parish. How long do we have to do certain things, and why we aren't doing certain other things now. And anyway, so with the pandemic and all that, you might have questions about vaccines, etc. I do have some information, more information about that. So. But I'd like to go ahead and let's do something fun first, right? So, now, how many of you have had the joy, privilege of actually being able to go to the Holy Land? How many? It always has been unusual to be able to do it. It's not an easy trip, right? Even in the early days, it took hours to get there. Some actually in the earliest days, it took days to get there, right? And they had to go by land and foot and ships and all of that. It was dangerous. It's a little dangerous today, perhaps, right? And it cost a lot of money to do it, right? It's not an inexpensive trip, so it does take a lot. It's of course why St. Francis, right, wanted to bring back pieces of the Holy Land when he had gone. Of course, he walked the whole time there. When he had gone. And he had seen, of course, in Bethlehem, they had the nativity, so he brought that back. That's the reason we have manger scenes, right? And also he walked the way of the cross, and that's why he brought that back. And that's why we have Stations of the Cross inside the church, to try and get people connected. But it's good, I think it's really good to remind ourselves that the land exists, right? This is a land where God became incarnate. He literally walked the earth, and he blessed the land by doing that. So the incarnation, right, the enfleshment of God has a real place. So it really happened. It's not just something in our heads. It's not some kind of spiritual, warm, fuzzy thing. It actually happened. There's a real place that it happened, and from that place, it went to the entire world. And that's the reason you and I are actually here today, and I'm on Facebook for whatever reason, right? So I'd like to just kind of give you this in terms of our upcoming Lent, right? Because it's coming up, believe it or not. Lent is just a few weeks away. Ash Wednesday is going to be February 17th. So the Mass schedule you can see there, 6:30 this year, because we need to make time in between that and the school Mass. I know that's early. But don't worry. 8:30 school, 12, 5:30, and then again at 7 in Spanish. It's just going to be modified slightly this year since we're not able to, we shouldn't, I should say, do certain things. So we're going to say the formula once, remember you are dust, and to dust you shall return. And then people will come up and in silence we'll be putting ashes on people. Anyway, just that's one. It's not going to be too different, right? Except you'll be wearing a mask. So anyway, so into the desert. Now, this is, of course, what everyone wishes the priest and deacons and everybody would do, and it usually ends up being something more like that, right? Or sometimes just a big thumbprint. Well, so I always try to get it right. I'm kind of OCD, So, and unfortunately, it often looks like this instead. So. Let's look, the first Sunday of Lent, all right, it's coming up, and I meant to actually have the date on there, but anyway, the first Sunday of Lent, the Spirit drove Jesus out into the desert, and he remained in the desert for 40 days, tempted by Satan. He was among wild beasts, and the angels ministered to him. After John had been arrested, Jesus came to Galilee, proclaiming the gospel of God. This is the time of fulfillment. The kingdom of God is at hand. Repent and believe in the gospel. This should sound familiar because we just had it, right? So you're going to be hearing that same Sunday gospel we just had repeated again for the first Sunday of Lent. This is year B. It's the year of Mark. We're going to be hearing a lot from Mark, except you'll see after we get in a couple of weeks, it's going to be John. But anyway, this is an actual picture that I didn't have the talent to take of the Judean wilderness. So sometimes when we think of the desert, we only think of like the Sahara, right? Or maybe our remembrances of the desert out west or something like that. The Judean desert is it's very rocky, and I've got some other images of it. So it's very rocky. You can actually see there is grass there. It needs some water, right? And it does rain occasionally. So they actually do get water, and some more of that. You can see some green there. And it's just kind of vast, though, when you're there. It seems to just go on and on and on forever. But it doesn't, right? It's actually, as you're going east, you're going to the Jordan River. And as you're going east in this Judean wilderness, you're going down, 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 eventually below sea level, because what's there at the bottom? The Dead Sea, exactly. And Jericho, the lowest city on the face of the earth, right? But that is, of course, where Jesus is. This is where, when we speak of Jesus being tempted in the desert, he is, in fact, here. He ends up here. Right, and this is right on the edge of the Jordan and right where it goes into the Dead Sea. And on that spot was built a monastery. I don't know, can you see the monastery on the hill? So just in case you can't, there it is. So it's that long thing there. And when I was actually there on sabbatical in 2015, we actually got to go up to it, and it's what do you call that thing? Yes, funicular. Thank you. Right. So I wish it was a ramp, because the funicular, I wasn't quite sure it was going to hold us, but it did. I mean, it looked all modern and everything. We just never know, right? So anyway, so you go up there, and it's just actually an amazing thing. Jesus probably went all over that mountain, but they built this Greek monastery, Greek Orthodox monastery there, and very, very interesting. So, and that's a little closer view of it. They just sort of cut it right into the mountain. I love how they did that there. So that's where Jesus was tempted. So again, I could give you a much longer thing, but I want to leave room for you to talk in the end. There's so much to show, and I don't want to just be like Dad showing slides from his last trip. So, second Sunday of Lent, February 28th. God put Abraham to the test. This is your first reading for that week. Take your son Isaac, your only one whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah. There you shall offer him up as a holocaust on a height that I will point out to you. When they came to the place of which God had told him, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. Now, is everybody familiar with this, the sacrifice of Isaac, right? Now, of course, what happened at the end? Right, so he didn't go through because the angel came, sent the messenger of God, and God instead provided a ram, which a ram is a what? It's a male sheep, right? So this is key, right? The sheep is always in there, right? You've got Exodus that's going to come up, and of course Jesus being the Lamb of God. So this is where you get that real first image of the sheep taking the place of the life of a person. So, Moriah. Guess where Moriah is? Or what should it say is there today? Jerusalem. That is the mount we are talking about. So you've probably seen somewhere this kind of picture, right? The gold dome there in the middle is a very popular image as you're looking from the outside into the city of Jerusalem. So the Dome of the Rock, it's a mosque that was built there about, I want to say, 600, about 800 something. Anyway, the Dome of the Rock is there, and it now marks the place. So, of course, before the Dome of the Rock, there was a what there? There was a Catholic Church, and before our church, there was the temple in Jerusalem. So it's had a lot of things going on, right? But the temple, of course, was there much longer than our church was there. The church was the Crusader church that was torn down by the Muslims. And then, but the temple was there. Who tore the temple down? The year 70 AD? The Romans, right? You can still see, by the way, as the Romans, when they razed it to the ground, they razed the entire thing to the ground. And so you can see, from where the retaining wall is, these depressions in the ground where these huge stones had been leveled over, and they hit the ground and left these huge depressions there. You can still see it, and the stones themselves all down, broken, and everything like that. It's very, very interesting. So what's most interesting is that the temple, of course, was built on top of this rock because this is where Isaac went to sacrifice his son, right? And Abraham went to sacrifice his son, Isaac. So this all goes back to Abraham. So this is actually what's inside. You cannot get inside, so I had to go online to get this one. So, and of course, this is a nice aerial view. They certainly wouldn't let me up there, even if they would let me inside. So you can see that it actually is a rock. And because the Muslims are an Abrahamic faith, they too wanted to preserve this as well. But I think they have a different reason for wanting to preserve it. They think this is where Muhammad went up from heaven. Now, of course, a few hundred years before, they thought it was a different place. But it was only until we showed interest in the area that they moved it to this place. But still, they marked it, and so it's protected at least. That's now not an aerial view, but a view right across the bow there of the rock. Okay, so then into the gospel. I wanted to also talk about the gospel of the second Sunday of Lent. Jesus took Peter, James, and John and led them up a high mountain apart by themselves, and he was transfigured before him. Now, the transfiguration is always the second Sunday of Lent. It may be from Matthew, it may be from Mark, it may be from Luke, but it's always the second Sunday of Lent, and it always has been. In the earliest of the liturgy, right? That's one of the most beautiful things. The temptation was always the first, and transfiguration has always been the second. So, where was that? So, Mount Tabor, right? This is in Galilee. All right. So Jesus did 95% of his ministry in Galilee. We think of Jerusalem and all that, but almost everything, all of the miracles, all of the the loaves and fishes, all of that was done in Galilee. And so keep that in mind. So this is in Galilee. Galilee is beautiful. It's a beautiful valley. It has beautiful valleys and lots of green, believe it or not. And on a good year, when there's plenty of rain, the Jordan River's up, and so is the Sea of Galilee as well. Now, getting to the top of this thing, it actually, when you get there, it doesn't look terribly tall. It's like, well, I've seen taller mountains, right? I've been to the Rockies. I've been, the Alps, or wherever you've been. And I have not been to the Alps. But anyway, but it's actually deceptively steep, right? So they have a taxi service that takes you to the top. And you have to give over your life to these men driving this thing up and up and up and up on these hairpin turns. Right. So when I was on sabbatical, I lost my iPhone. This is the beginning of my whole sabbatical, right? I lost my iPhone. I thought I lost it in one of the taxis, and I would never get it back because there are lots of them there. Luckily, it just fell out on my bus that was at the bottom. So the bus driver found it, and I was able to get you lots more pictures, right? So, from the top, you can see the Jezreel Valley. The Jezreel Valley is steeped in history and apparently future as well. So the Jezreel Valley is the scene of the victory of Gideon and all kinds of different battles and everything like that. It also has another name, the plain has. Anybody know? Megiddo. So Armageddon is supposed to happen here. So on the plain of Megiddo. This is also the plain of Megiddo. Very interesting little thing. So inside the church, this is... you can see Max and his lovely wife Anne-Marie there. We had Mass there in this beautiful little church. It's not so little, beautiful little church there, and just an incredible place. Third Sunday of Lent, Jesus went up to Jerusalem. He found in the temple area those who sold oxen, sheep, and doves, as well as the money changers seated there. And he made a whip out of cords and drove them all out of the temple area with the sheep and the oxen. He spilled the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. And to those who sold doves, he said, "Take these out of here and stop making my Father's house a marketplace." At this, the Jews answered and said to him, "What sign can you show us for doing this?" Jesus answered and said to them, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." What's interesting is you're going to hear this gospel this Sunday. This Sunday is the anniversary of our dedication, and this is the gospel we'll be having for that. So you're going to get two images of it. So what I want to kind of draw home here is that temple that we've been talking about keeps coming up over and over and over. It doesn't seem to have much connection to a lot of Christians today, but certainly if you're Catholic, Orthodox, all that, it really does. So much of our liturgy and everything grew out of this, right? And because our temple now is not standing in Jerusalem, our temple is Well, us, but because we're part of, right? Yeah, that's great. You got it right. Yeah, we are the temple of God, but that's because we are part of Him. Really, destroyed this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. And St. John goes on to say he was talking about the temple of his body. And through baptism, of course, you and I become parts of that body, right? It's beautiful to think about. That's the whole point. So the idea of the temple, the whole point is that's where the worship of God happened. They studied in the synagogues. That wasn't a place of worship. That was just a place where they studied the word and all of that. It was actually in the temple where the worship happened, okay? Where they offered sacrifice. But that's still happening. Even though the temple is gone since 70 AD, it's still happening because Jesus Christ lives. He is the temple, and we form the rest of the temple, part of the temple. We're part of His body. So the fourth Sunday, again, goes back to the temple, all right? So this is from Chronicles, 2 Chronicles. In those days, all the princes of Judah, the priests and the people, added infidelity to infidelity, practicing all the abominations of the nations and polluting the Lord's temple, which He had consecrated in Jerusalem. So that the Chronicles goes on to talk about the exile. Okay, so the Jews were exiled in the 500s, from about 585 to 535ish, and then it goes on a few verses later as they were brought back. In the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, in order to fulfill the word of the Lord spoken about Jeremiah, the Lord inspired King Cyrus of Persia to issue this proclamation through his kingdom. Thus says Cyrus, king of Persia, all the kingdoms of the earth, the Lord, the God of heaven, has given to me, and He has also charged me to build Him a house in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. What's interesting, of course, Cyrus is not a Jew. Right? He's a pagan, and yet the Lord used him to bring the Jews back and to rebuild the temple. Right? So this is where this temple comes back. Solomon's temple had been destroyed. Now comes this new temple, the new temple that Herod is going to expand. And so this is not the actual temple. Obviously, it's gone, but a reconstruction of what it probably looked like and how Herod would have adorned it and made it more beautiful. So the fifth Sunday, I've got more pictures, don't worry. So the fifth Sunday of Lent, this gives us a chance to go to Galilee. Okay, some Greeks who had come to worship at the Passover feast came to Philip, who was from Bethsaida in Galilee. Again, I mentioned that so much of, almost all of Jesus' ministry actually happened in Galilee. So those 3 years that He was forming the apostles and collecting all those disciples, that happened in Galilee. They knew Him there first. Those are the people that came to Jerusalem. So what you'll see is all of these Gospels are really being centered in Jerusalem, but we're going to take a little look into Galilee. This is the shore of the Sea of Galilee. Can you see that kind of shadow in the back there? Those are the Golan Heights. Those of you might remember that battle of the Golan Heights, right, back in the 80s, I think it was. That's where Israel took the land about 3 miles worth from the heights on, because Syria was firing in, apparently. So they decided, we're going to stop this, and they took land 3 miles back. So let's take a little look into a bit of Galilee. In Galilee, this is actually the 4th century synagogue built on the foundation of the 1st century synagogue. And the 1st century synagogue is where Jesus did the bread of life discourse, right? It mentions specifically that He was in the synagogue in Capernaum. All right, so this is in Capernaum where Jesus did that. So I read the discourse to our people while we were there. And the guy walking that way, that's Habib. He was our guide, right? He was a Palestinian Christian, and they're very rare today, though they weren't that rare many, many years ago. But they're very rare today. But he is from there. He was baptized there. His name, Habib, is Arabic for beloved, like John the Beloved. So Habib, you'll hear that. So we read that whole discourse there. That's another view of that 4th century one. But keep in mind, it was literally built on the very foundation. You can actually see the dark stone underneath the white stone if you look on the side, which was the foundation of the 1st century synagogue where Jesus spoke. It's absolutely amazing. So this is the church in Cana in Galilee. So what happened at Cana? Yes, there was a wedding in Cana, and of course that first miracle. And it was from the first miracle, it says, and they began to believe in Him. right? So this is where people began to believe, wait a minute, this guy's got something here. And so what we did, of course, in Galilee, in Cana, it's a very popular thing to renew your wedding vows. So Habib handed little veils out to all of the ladies. And so all of the ladies in our, couples in our trip, got to renew their vows. So that was very nice. So also during Lent comes two big solemnities. I didn't put St. Joseph in here, even though I should have. It is the year of St. Joseph. But for the instance of time, I just wanted to skip ahead to the other big solemnity, which sort of breaks our Lent for a little bit. On the solemnity of Lent, by the way, even if it falls on Friday, do you have to fast or abstain? Nope. So you get to treat it like it's a big party, right? We forget that it's Lent for a day. The Gloria comes back in the liturgy. The liturgy actually is very beautiful in all of this because it's the Annunciation of the Lord. We often tend to think Christmas, of course, is when the Word was made flesh, but actually the Word was made flesh at the conception, right? The appearance of it, you finally got to see all this prep work 9 months later on Christmas Day. But, of course, it all happened March 20th. We celebrate it March 25th, which is exactly 9 months from Christmas. And the angel Gabriel was sent from God to a town of Galilee called Nazareth to a virgin betrothed to a man named Joseph of the house of David, and the virgin's name was Mary. So I put this here because, so you have a huge church. I'll show you the upper in a second. And then below that is another kind of church they built. And then you can see below that is a cave, right? And this is Mary's home. The archaeology on this is very good. All of the sites that we're really talking about here have very good archaeology. They goes way, way back. And what's different is, so in Latin, the Word was made flesh. And so verbum caro factum est. But only on this site, in the whole world, does the altar say, verbum caro hic factum est. The word hic means here. And the Word was made flesh here. What's interesting is in the prayers of the liturgies that we do at all of these different sites, the word here is constantly being inserted. O Lord, who here became flesh, that kind of thing. Because that's the only place on earth that you can do that. Isn't that amazing to think about? Because it actually did happen, right? Incarnation happened. God came to this earth, and it's a beautiful thing. So it was here. That's a wider view of it. You see, these are centuries and centuries of building, and it gets torn down, they build again, torn down, build again. And that's another wider view of it. I mentioned how it was even lower, right? And this is all still below the main church, and this is above in the main church, which you can actually see all of that from there. They have a little thing you can see. But we had Mass at the upper church on this altar here. And then if you look up, there has this, it's very modern, but I thought it was really kind of beautiful, this very dome that goes above it. So it's actually kind of striking, right? So back now, we've gotten to Palm Sunday, the 27th of March, when Jesus and his disciples drew near to Jerusalem, to Bethphage and Bethany at the Mount of Olives. He sent two of his disciples and said to them, "Go into the village opposite you, and immediately on entering it you will find a colt tethered on which no one has ever sat. Untie it and bring it here." Many people spread their cloaks on the road, and others spread leafy branches that they had cut from the fields. Those preceding him, as well as those following, kept crying out, "Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the kingdom of our father David that is to come. Hosanna in the highest." Now, if you go and look at our Palm Sunday window, the entry into Jerusalem, you'll see what one of the things we did is allegorical, it's called, where you take things from today and you put them into the window to connect the past with the future. And you'll see that the palms that are in the window are actually palmetto. This is the state tree of South Carolina. So they're putting palmetto leaves down in front of our Lord. And if you look carefully as well in different windows, you will see these yellow flowers. That is the yellow jasmine. Okay, very good. So again, connecting us with because the incarnation does that, right? It connects us in a very real way to everything. So Palm Sunday. What's interesting is as you go down from the top of the Mount of Olives, about halfway down, you come to this church. And it's called the church where Jesus wept. All right? Dominus Flavit, it's called. Jesus wept. In Luke's gospel, Luke is the only one that actually records this. Luke says that as he was going into the city, he stopped and he wept over the city. And so that's where it was. And on top of that church are these kind of large vase vials. Actually, they're meant to be little tear vials that women would wear. Women would collect their tears. And that's why when you hear about the woman who washed Jesus' feet with her tears, she had the vials. She wasn't just crying the whole time. She had a vial, and she was pouring the tears onto his feet. So it's a very interesting thing. So from that church, you can see it looks out over Jerusalem, into Jerusalem, I should say, and the cross does not mark the Dome of the Rock. Can you guess where what church the cross is actually marking? The church is called the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the resurrection. Right. So we're not marking the Dome of the Rock. It's actually, if you're right on the median of it, it's looking right at where Jesus rose from the dead. Okay, very good. That's all. As you're going down, there's a beautiful church called St. Mary Magdalene. As you're going down, it's a very kind of steep thing on Palm Sunday. They still go this route every Sunday. And it's a beautiful Greek Orthodox convent there. And then, of course, Holy Thursday, April Fool's Day this year, right? Hopefully we won't have any fooling from pandemics. So, I received from the Lord what I also handed on to you, that the Lord Jesus, on the night he was handed over, took bread, and after he had given thanks, broke it and said, "This is my body that is for you. Do this in remembrance of me." In the same way also the cup after supper, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this as often as you drink it in remembrance of me. For as often as you eat this bread and drink the cup, you proclaim the death of the Lord until he comes." So this is that second reading on Holy Thursday. Remembering the gospel is the washing of the feet as well. So Holy Thursday, what's interesting is that the upper room, right? It happened in the upper room. This is the upper room today. You might say, well, that doesn't look very ancient. It's not. But it's on the very site of the upper room. They're absolutely certain it is the site. And so the vaulted ceilings come from the Crusader times when we actually had a church there. It was, of course, we lost that, and we've been trying to get it back. The Franciscans have owned that land from time immemorial, right? It was given to Francis, probably, anyway. And they've been trying to get it back, but Israel still won't give it back yet. And for a time, it was also a mosque. It was being used as a mosque. So, but you can still come visit it. You can't pray. You're not supposed to have Mass there or anything like that. But they did make an exception and allowed Pope Benedict and Pope Francis to have a Mass there. If I remember correctly, though, they wouldn't allow John Paul II for some reason. So maybe they got softer as they went along. But the site is there, and you actually do go into the second floor. Then, of course, comes Good Friday, April 2nd this year. So they took Jesus, and carrying the cross himself, he went out to the place called Place the Skull, in Hebrew Golgotha, where they crucified him. And with him two others, one on either side with Jesus in the middle. Pilate also had an inscription written and put on the cross. It read, "Jesus the Nazarene, the King of the Jews." And many of the Jews read this inscription because the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and it was written in Hebrew, Latin, and Greek. So I chose that particular image because it actually has it written in Hebrew, Latin, and Greek, if you look carefully on it. It's a beautiful image, too. The word Golgotha, right, in Hebrew, that word means something rounded, right? And that's why Calvary is the same thing. It means the place of the skull, right? Calvarius means skull. So it was a rounded top, and it was there because that was where people could see. They wanted people to see people being crucified. Was there. So if you go to there today, it's all part of one kind of church complex today, both the resurrection and the crucifixion, because they weren't far from each other. But this is what the Greek Orthodox have this area, and you can tell because they have lots of candles and lots of icons and everything like that. And so you can see where the pilgrims there are kind of looking underneath that altar, because underneath that altar, now this is beside it, but underneath that altar is also where you can actually reach in and touch the stone that's there. And so beside the altar, they do have, encased in glass, part of the stone But you can actually reach down under that altar and touch the stone of Golgotha, which is really very moving. Except the Greek Orthodox priests keep saying, okay, move on, move it. And they know how to tell you to move on in every language, right? So anyway, not that the Franciscans would be better, I don't know. But you would think they would because they're Franciscans. So you finally come to Easter Sunday, April 4th this year. On the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb early in the morning while it was still dark and saw the stone removed from the tomb. And so then Peter and John come, the beloved, and then they went in and he had arrived and he saw and believed. So this picture is actually a picture of what they call the edicule. It's a structure built around what remains of the tomb. The original tomb we have pieces of it, right? Because, it's been, again, it's changed hands several times. But they know exactly where it was because St. Helena, Constantine's mom, had this structure, a circular structure erected over it. And the foundations were always still there. So they always knew exactly where it was. And you have that circular foundation and also the tomb, pieces of the tomb itself. So this is the doorway in. Again, this part is controlled by the Greeks, so you can only go in for a little while, unless you do have the privilege of being there. We were able to have Mass in the morning. The Franciscans are given a certain amount of time, and they allow 2 groups to go in before them to have Mass. You can't sing or anything, but you can go in and have Mass, right, in the tomb, which is actually a 2-part thing. You go into this antechamber, which is in tombs where they would prepare the body, and then you go into the actual part where the tomb was itself. The altar is on that part, and you have to dip way down to get in there. So we had, pre-pandemic times, we had 30-something people in this tiny little place. So, what's that? You couldn't fall. Yes, right. There was no way to fall, right? So you could go to sleep and still be there, standing straight up. And there was enough room so 3 people at a time could come into where I was, because I wanted people to be able to be near the altar itself, because that's the whole point, right? And so that's so this is that antechamber where we are. I was reading the gospel, I think, there, and they have a little candle there in the middle. And now I had told the pilgrims not to take any pictures because just to enjoy it, but I'm kind of glad they did, because otherwise I would have no proof for myself that I was in there. So ignore me all the time if you want. So anyway, so this is 2 angles. 2 different pilgrims took pictures and sent them to me, which is wonderful. So one from the left side, one from the right side. And they just finished excavating underneath that altar and found everything just like they would presume was there. So they found the Crusader period and everything like that. So they absolutely certain. And so this is finally our little group that we're holding our little crosses. We had just finished the Way of the Cross that day. And so that's really the end of my presentation. There's so much more I could go on about, but ultimately, again, just as you, and even I would even encourage you, go online and look up some of these places, right? And maybe read ahead and say, where is this happening? Even the Old Testament part, remember, where is this happening? And look it up online. Look up Google Images, right? and see these places, because God did walk the earth, and from that place, then we exist, and that's a beautiful thing. So any questions you might like to ask first about the Holy Land? Then I'd like to just really open it up to anything. And I wish there was a way our wonderful Facebook friends could. Oh, okay, great. Yes. Okay, so Emily has promised that she will read the ones that she likes. Just kidding. So if you have any questions for Facebook, we'll try to get those in as well. So anybody, first of all, here that I see?
Yeah.
Oh, Janice.
The title slide, I'm kind of curious what the title slide, what
right.
we're looking at, is that the Sea of Galilee and then Golden Heights behind it?
Yeah, exactly. That was the Sea of Galilee. So I'll go back to that. I think
it's a very beautiful shot.
It is, and I wish I could tell you that I took that one. All the really nice shots, there it is.
That is just beautiful.
So all the really nice shots are probably ones I didn't take. So.
Golden Heights, and then you're looking
Exactly.
at the Sea of Galilee. So
Yeah.
where would you be standing?
So this is probably Tiberias, if I'm looking right, because seeing there's actually a city right on there, because it's also called the Sea of Tiberias in the scriptures. It's also called the Sea of Gennesaret and Galilee. Anyway, it's all three things. But it looks like it's Tiberias from the city part that's right on the left there. Oh, yeah. You know, it really is a remarkable place. It's actually, and you look at it, and it looks so small. You think of sea, and like you can't see the other side, but you really can see the other side of the sea. But it really is huge, and it's very deep as well. It actually was a rift valley. Are y'all familiar with what that means? So it's where the earth started to pull apart, and then it stopped. But it goes all the way down. That's why the Dead Sea is there. It goes all the way down to the Dead Sea eventually, the Jordan Valley, the river there. Any questions on that?
No, just lots of compliments.
Okay.
They're thanking you.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're welcome. So I'd like to maybe open it out. Do anybody have any general questions? Especially? Oh yeah, of course.
So what was the most, so just personally, so what was the most meaningful spot on the whole journey that you found? What was the most meaningful spot?
Yeah. So what was the most meaningful spot for me? So that, it kind of changes. I've been a couple of times. I've been blessed, and I guess this time it was the tomb because we actually got to have Mass there. Before, I didn't really get to spend a lot of time. They were always, shoving me off to the next place, right? But this time it was just, and also I had read all about the new archaeology and everything that had just been done on it, and so it was just a very wonderful place to be able to just kind of pause and be able to pray. For the first time to be able to pray there, it was nice.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, I say the very first time I ever went was 2005, I think it was. And I just went as a pilgrim, right? So even though I was a priest, but I went as a pilgrim. And it was the first time and some of you have heard me tell this story, we went to do the Way of the Cross, because all pilgrims get to do that. That's an important thing. And so we got our cross and everything like that, and we're trying to go. And I was expecting it to be sort of like our Stations of the Cross, right? Like, we adore you, O Christ, and we praise you, because by your holy cross you redeem the world, and you have pause, you get silence and all that. Well, it was chaos, right? Absolute chaos. People are walking by, there's people driving by, constantly driving, and you have to move out of the way, and you got this cross on you like this, and then we finally you have to go through the market to get there where you need to go, and they're trying to sell things to people while we're in our group, So it was just chaos, absolute chaos. And I remember just kind of being angry about that. And then it later, unfortunately it didn't happen right away. I'm sorry, Jesus. But it dawned on me, I was like, it's probably much more like it was.
Yeah.
It was chaos. It wasn't a quiet, walk, from Pilate's place to where he was going to be killed. It was full of chaos and people and everything.
No cars.
Right, but no cars. Maybe some donkeys going by. But yeah. Yes, Carrie.
Did your trip include Bethlehem?
So yes, our trip did include Bethlehem, and I'm sorry I didn't include it on here, but it did include Bethlehem, and that's it's also such a moving place. It's just to see the devotion of the people throughout there, and that's actually where, until recently, most of the Palestinian Christians lived. At one point, it was majority Christian. Not that long ago, just a few decades ago. Now they're lucky if it's 20% there. But even the Holy Land itself is like less than 3%, I think, Christian, where it used to be much. Yeah. So we need to pray for and support our brothers and sisters. These are the original Christians, right? These are the ones who heard the call. These are the ones who they were converted, right? They're actually. Their heritage is actually not Arab. It's actually the people from around the area. So it's really interesting. Yes, Rob.
It sounds like you had many masses.
So yes, we had many masses. Yeah.
Well, did you have groups coming through while you were doing the mass?
So did we have groups coming through? Typically no. If I remember right, it was pretty quiet. I mean, they were pretty respectful of that. Even when we were in the tomb, they closed the doors for us so no one would come in. And that was nice. So yeah, pretty much because the group we had set up the masses everywhere, and it was good. Yeah. Yes.
Notre Dame students join us?
That's right. Yeah. So they were at one point when we were at the Transfiguration. These Notre Dame students showed up, and they were thrilled to find a mass in English. You know? They had a mass in about every other language in the world, and they went, but they finally got one in English, so they were very, very happy. And it was Notre Dame, right? So, go Irish. Anything else? Yes.
My friends who made this trip several times always emphasize the wall around Bethlehem.
Oh, yes. So she was just saying, for the people in Facebook, her friends who had gone before always emphasized the wall around Bethlehem. That is one of the saddest parts of the trip. Now, when you're on a tour bus, you typically don't have too much trouble getting through the wall, but you can see the Palestinians, they have such a hard time getting in and out. That wall is so tall. It's like as tall as one of the walls, the outside of our church here. I mean, it goes all the way around, the entire city, and they have little checkpoints and gates and things like that. It comes from a time, I don't know if y'all remember. You can still see the bullets on the Franciscan church there inside Bethlehem from the uprising that had happened. Why Israel wanted to build a wall to keep people from going in and committing all kinds of different things. But it's still very sad, All right, anybody else? Well, thank you. Yeah. So mask back on as we... Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.